This is Andrea Olson with EastIdahoNews.com. I am joined currently by Brian Laundrie's attorney, or the Laundrie family attorney, Steven Bertolino over in New York. First off, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate your time.
Yes, good afternoon, Andrea. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and so with the recent developments that just happened with Brian Laundrie and his family, how are his parents currently doing, Chris and Roberta?
His parents are holding up okay. I spoke to them a little while ago. It's the first full day, and they're getting through it. They'll get better over time.
And now, my understanding too is that you've known the Laundrie family for quite some time.
That's correct. Well over 20 years.
So you know them very, very well, and you watched Brian Laundrie grow up, basically. Would that be accurate to say?
It's very accurate. My children grew up with his children, with Chris's children, which would be Brian and Cassie.
Okay. So when was the last time Chris and Roberta Laundrie talked to their son? Do you know? Was it September 13th, or when was that specifically?
Yes, it was Monday morning, September 13th.
Do you know kind of what that conversation entailed?
I don't know word for word what it entailed, but I know the gist of it was Brian had said, I actually spoke to them in the morning, and then later on, Brian had said that he was going out for a hike. He had packed his backpack. Chris and Roberta didn't think too much about it because, he was always going out for hikes. He was a young man, independent. But Chris said that when he left, he was pretty upset. He was pretty despondent, and he said he needed to get out. And didn't want him to leave, but he couldn't stop him from leaving.
And I've heard that he was pretty upset. It almost sounded like he was grieving. I'm not sure if that's what's been happening. Was Brian Laundrie grieving that day for any reason?
Well, Andrea, I had used that term last night after multiple interviews. I had been using the term grieving all day with respect to Chris and Roberta, and it was probably not the best word to use with Brian. The better word was he was distressed, he was upset, seemed to have a lot on his mind, and he wanted to get out and go. Be that as it may, Brian is no longer with us. We can now understand that perhaps he was just in a bad place at that time.
So they never had any form of communication with him after September 13th?
No, none.
Did he ever talk to his parents about what specifically happened between him and Gabby, or did he ever confide in you about what may have happened?
Brian is my client, and communications between attorneys and clients, as you know, are privileged. So I can't divulge any of that, either with respect to Chris and Roberta or with respect to Brian.
Many people have been speculating too about, Chris and Roberta Laundrie suddenly show up to the Carlton Reserve the other day. I realize that there has been a huge search for Brian, but they, show up the other day to try and help the FBI, and then suddenly human remains are found. Is there any truth to them knowing specifically where he was? I realize that it was underwater for some time, but I mean, when you look at those pieces, people think it's suspicious. I don't know if there's anything you can say to that.
Andrea, I feel like a broken record on that question, and I realize it's the first time you've posed it to me, and I appreciate that. But what it comes down to is, the park had just recently opened. Chris and Roberta wanted to go there and look. As I've said repeatedly over the last day and a half, you start at the beginning of a trailhead. You park your car, the trailhead is there, that's where you start. Chris and Roberta knew that these were the trails that Brian liked to hike. They parked. Law enforcement was there with them. And just a little correction, they weren't, quote, assisting law enforcement on that day. They were going out there, of their own volition, just to go and search. And also to get some fresh air for themselves and look for their son where they thought their son would be. Fortunately, police were notified, and more fortunately, they accompanied Chris and Roberta in. And better still, there was an independent news cameraman who was following them for days. He was there. So they started down the trail. If you've done any hiking out in Idaho and wherever it might be, you start at the trailhead. And that's what they did. They started walking in. As they got about a mile or so, we'll say 20, 30 minutes in, they were going, in and out of the woods, zigzagging, if you will. And, they came across the white dry bag. And at the same time, I should say Chris came across the white dry bag. At the same time and close by, law enforcement came across the backpack, which was nearer to the remains. So as it played out, it was caught on film. There's nothing untoward. You can call it a coincidence, as someone else did. Bottom line is, even the FBI and everyone in there has acknowledged that area was 2 to 3 feet underwater, several weeks ago. You may have washes, and rivers that ebb and flow out in Idaho and Wyoming, and certain seasons, those rivers are flowing. In Florida, it's very similar, except it's a lot more frequent, meaning that you could have 2 feet in one day, and the next day, you have nothing. Maybe not that quick, but you get the gist of what happened in that area of the preserve.
Were the Laundries very familiar with that area of the preserve or the Carlton Reserve in general?
Well, the term very, I not to take issue with it, but I would say they were familiar with it. Chris had hiked in there many times. Chris had hiked with Brian in there many times. Roberta had hiked in there. It's a place that the locals go, to walk. If you want to go for a walk, you can go as far as you want. You want to go for 1 mile, you want to walk the dog, you want to go for 10 miles, or if you wanted to camp out for a few days, whatever you wanted to do, you pretty much could do in that park.
And speaking of the backpack that was found along with the notebook, have FBI agents ever shared that information, like what's in the notebook, with Chris and Roberta? Have they been through it? Have they seen it?
No, we haven't been given any information on that. I'm sure the FBI has done their research and their investigations with respect to every content that was in the backpack and the dry bag. We haven't been given any information on the contents.
Obviously, there's been a lot of speculation too from people, and I know we don't really like speculation and that the FBI has to do their investigative work, but there's been speculation about, okay, did Brian, commit suicide, or did somebody, kill him? Does anything sound one way or the other, or did he ever have problems that he had talked to his parents about suicide? Not saying that it is, but we just don't know.
You finished it perfectly. We just don't know. To my knowledge, Brian was never, quote, suicidal, to my knowledge. And ultimately, was he in a bad state of mind when he left on Monday, the 13th? Absolutely. Chris has conveyed that to me. Hindsight is always 20/20, and Chris has said, I wish I didn't let him walk out the door. But he was a young adult, 22 years old. He's certainly allowed to walk out the door. And going backwards is easy. Going forwards is going to be hard because Brian's no longer with us, and there's a lot of what could have been done, and what if we had done this differently, and so on. As of right now, Chris and Roberta are going to grieve their son.
Has the FBI or the county coroner over there told you when they're going to release details on how he passed away?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I did speak with my contact over in the Northport PD, who informed me just a short while ago that they were not going to release a cause of death or a manner of death today. The body, as I said, is being turned over to an anthropologist, and at some point, I don't want to say early next week because that wasn't given to me, but I was told that when the results are done, we will be notified.
Has the Laundrie family and the Petito family talked to each other during this time as of today?
No, not at all.
Do you think they will in the future?
That's up to the families themselves. And, I would imagine there's a lot of, I know, we all know there's a lot of anger And, you know, there's a lot of grief on both sides with the grief. A lot of anger on the Petito side, understandably. When all said and done, you know, that's not up to me, that's up to the families.
Is there something that the Laundrie family would like to tell people today, or is there a message that you would like to tell people?
Yeah, there's lots of messages out there. Some of them I put out there forcefully. You know, ultimately, people do have a right in this country to remain silent. You know, we try not to judge people by witch hunt or by mobs. And, you know, if we lose that in this country, you know, we go back several hundred years. You know, is that really what we want? You know, would we rather have a just and civilized society versus one ruled by mobs? And if you think about what's happened over the last few weeks, you know, people have pointed the finger at me. They pointed the finger at the Laundries. They said we've done this, this, and this, and they've convicted us in the court of public opinion under the guise of the internet. And, you know, all of that, you know, as I've said in some choice words, you know, it's just not right. It's unfair. And, you know, in this age of I need information now and I have to have it right now, you know, people need to take a step back and understand that our system of justice relies on, you know, some deliberative thinking and thought processes and not jumping to conclusions and conjecture. And that's about it.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Steven. Those were all my questions. I really do appreciate your time today.
Andrea, thank you so much.